All right, guys. It is time for...
Ready?
I'm on it. Keep going, keep going. Keep going, keep going. Keep going, keep going.
Come on.
Come on.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on.
Hey, guys, I wanted to remind you there are two numbers that we're going for on our live stream and on our podcast, and that is 50,000 subscribers.
Come on.
So
Yeah.
if you haven't subscribed, or if you've got some folks you know who haven't subscribed, hey, many of you who are online right now are on the team, and probably around tens, if not hundreds of people every weekend. Invite them to subscribe. And the other is 100 reviewers. 100 reviewers. Here's what I wanted to talk about today in our soul session is discouragement.
Ooh.
Does anybody ever get discouraged?
Absolutely.
Is anybody discouraged? Discouragement happens sometimes when reality doesn't meet expectations. And as I was saying earlier, Steph and I have been, working on the book. We went to Michigan. We've been doing a lot of podcasts and radio shows, even a few TV shows, those kind of things, because all the proceeds from the book actually go to the next generation, to all the things that is going on there. And so we haven't been here on a weekend in over 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Now we've had incredible. Pastor Terrell was here. He did an incredible job. Pastor Tyler spoke, I think, 3 of those weekends, and then Carson may have spoke 1. I think.
Yeah, he did.
So, anyways, we had incredible teachings and speakings and all that, but this was our first weekend back, and so. You're coming, hey, we're coming back to the fall. We're looking forward to all the cool things that are going to happen. And you're hoping for some energy and excitement, because when you've been somewhere for a while, it's very easy for yourself, for the ministry, for the church to kind of get into a rut. And so you come back, with a sense of hoping to see some things that have changed in those 5 weeks for the better, to just create energy. I'm not talking about the ministry as far as loving people, but just, whether it's in the facility or the property. In times past, that's been one of those things that have happened. And then you often then forget, though, that this is the last weekend before school starts. And it was a beautiful, beautiful weekend here in South Florida. And so when your expectations aren't met, right? You're prepared, you're excited, you're passionate about what you're going to share. Just kind of sharing you an inside scoop on ministry. I'm sure your life, what you do professionally has the same kind of unmet expectation. And so then when you come back and there's not quite that excitement of everybody glad to see you, when people are out doing their last minute school shopping, when the giving is not what you would hope to go into the fall, all those kind of things. It's easy to get discouraged.
Yeah.
And discouragement is dangerous. Because discouragement, whether you're discouraged because of your finances, you're discouraged because of your health, you're discouraged, right? Have you ever been sick and it just seems like it'll never go away and you just kind of get discouraged?
Yeah.
And, or you get discouraged because your spouse or your boyfriend, or you get broken up with, or maybe some folks are discouraged because it's time to go back to school or time to go back to college, or you didn't get the promotion. Anyways, whatever it is, it's really dangerous. We don't often realize how dangerous discouragement is, because a lot of people quit over discouragement. Discouragement can lead to depression. Depression can lead to suicide. It can negatively affect relationships, all those different kinds of things. And what I tend to do sometimes is not necessarily the right thing, but one of the right things I think is always, well, what does Scripture have to say about discouragement?
Yeah.
And I found one that I thought is a surprising place to deal with discouragement. Okay. And I think this can really help maybe me and hopefully you as well.
Yeah.
But it's in Joshua. In the book, we talk about how the people of God go from being enslaved to their destiny, right? Because we don't want to stay where we are. We want to experience that success that we dream of. And that's kind of what we talk about in the book. And then at the very end, we talk about Joshua a little bit. But Joshua is the one that led after Moses. He's the one that actually took them to their promise, right? It's like if he's the dude that got the business started, or he's the one that got the profit made, right? He's the one that brought the victory home. And I wanted to just read a little bit of this because, again, I think hopefully this will be encouraging. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' aide, right? Moses' mentoree. Moses, my servant, is dead, God said. Now then, you and all these people get ready. Isn't there a song? Get ready. Okay. It must not have been a very good song. Yes. Get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give them. And he says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the great river to the Euphrates, all the Hittite country. And he tells them all of the land they're going to have. He says, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I'll be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Woo, that's good news, right?
Yeah.
And then he says something that just doesn't make any sense. He says, be strong and courageous because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors. And then in verse 7, he says, be strong and very courageous. And he tells them, be careful to be obedient because God's given them the directions on how to be successful. He says, keep the book of the law in verse number 8, meditate on it, think about it. And he says, if you will, you'll be prosperous and successful. And then he says in verse 9, have I not commanded you? Now he's, hey, listen, remember I told you, I commanded you to be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord will go with you wherever you go. So here's why this freaks me out a little bit. Why would God tell them, the four things that I kind of wrote down there is he tells them to be strong, to be courageous, to not be afraid, and to not be discouraged. Why would he tell them that after they're about to experience what they've been waiting 40 years for?
Yeah.
Think about that. They're about to have their biggest victory. They're about to win the gold medal. They're about to turn a profit for the first time. They're about to get 100 reviews on Amazon, right? 50 subscribers. They're about, and they've had their parents die talking about this victory.
Yeah.
They've wandered around in the wilderness. So there's something about victory or on the edge, verge of success or even success itself that can actually be discouraging.
Yeah.
Because he's really, really serious. It's right at the beginning of Joshua's leadership. He's saying, hey, and he tells them these four things. And I think there's a reason that he uses these four. The first thing he says is be strong. And, I have this little program where you can kind of go back and see if there's the definitions of these English words, because in the original language, which is a Greek in this case, in Hebrew in this case. And he says, to be strong, it means to keep a hold on.
Okay.
So think about that. What are they supposed to keep a hold of? And what I think is what he said in the first part is the promise. Because they're going to cross the river, and if you know the story, the first place they come to is Jericho. And the Bible says that the walls were high and that Jericho was tightly shut up. In other words, it seemed like an impenetrable, that's a pretty hard word for me to say, impenetrable force, an impossibility.
Yeah.
In other words, something where you cross the river, you're all pumped up, and it's like, really?
Yeah.
Have you ever, 40 years we've wandered, 40 years we've worked hard, 40 years we've struggled and we've doubted and we've lost our parents and they were afraid and all this stuff. Moses has died and now we got these huge walls. And so I think there's a reminder that even when you're about to experience your greatest victory, or even on the other side of your Jordan River, or just as you're about to have great success, God reminds us, he says, you better keep hold of my promise. Because in your victory, experiencing your breakthrough, there are going to be giants. There are going to be such opposition that you're going to be tempted to give up on to let the promise go. For example, here at the church, one of the things that we've talked years about is 50 campuses, reaching 100,000 people with $150 million.
Yeah.
And today I talked about restarting the Pensacola campus, and I talked about starting a Sunday night service, Spanish-speaking service, yeah. And if you think about what we're doing online and some of those things and ways in which we're trying to get to that number 50. But it's been years since I said that. And we've been going the roundabout way. In other words, instead of just like, okay, we've added this campus and now we've added this campus, we had 5 and now we have 10. At times we've gone the wrong direction, right? And so it's easy to let go of a dream or let go of a relationship or let go of a job, right? It's easy, in other words, if we're not strong. And I think that's why he's telling Joshua, he's saying, hey, because the first group of people that God actually wanted to take into the promised land, let go of the dream because of the giants.
Yeah.
And I think God's reminding all of us, right? I don't know what your dream is, but be strong.
Yeah.
Right? Be strong. The next thing he says is be courageous. And in verse 6, he says, be courageous. Verse 7, he says, be very courageous. And it was interesting what logos said that Hebrew word means. It means to make the mind strong. Because where does this battle happen? It happens in the mind, doesn't it? Yeah. Think about it. Right now, everybody in here has a conversation going on in their head.
Yeah.
Right? What's going on in your head?
Right now, I'm just listening to what you're saying.
Yeah, but you're having a conversation about what I'm saying. Are you thinking about something in your life, or are you thinking about?
I was just kind of thinking about kind of what you had said about the 50, 100, 150, and about like I thought about, it was a quick went off, but it was like, okay, are we in the sense? Is it going to be the next generation that sees it? And so that's kind of like what my mind went off to for a second.
So you're just trying to get rid of me?
No, not at all.
No, I'm kidding. But what I'm saying is that we all have that going on, right? The battle is in the mind. When what I hoped would happen this weekend didn't happen. Yeah. I didn't have a conversation with somebody. I had it in the mind, right? And that's why I think to be courageous is to do what we need to do, not necessarily what we want to do. What I want to do when I get discouraged is to separate myself from people.
Yeah.
Which is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To be here, to be around you, to talk to staff. Those are the kind of things that are encouraging. But if we're not careful, our mind, right, this conversation that we're having will pull us away. So it's interesting that God says, hey, he says, you need to be strong, keep hold of my promise, but also be aware of the conversation that's going on in your mind. I talked today about how often that the enemy's always lying, right? Because here's the conversation that's going on in my mind when what I hoped would happen didn't necessarily happen. It's like, well, is it ever going to happen?
Yeah.
Am I in the way of it happening? Why didn't this person do that? Why didn't this happen? And why is it right? It's never going to happen. You just should quit. You should just, all of those things, right? That's going on in my mind.
Yeah.
And And the scriptures remind, he says, you have to be courageous, very courageous, because the mind is a powerful thing. Like they say, a powerful thing to waste. But but we all have these conversations, and we have to be courageous to listen to the right voice.
Yeah.
Because there's another voice that is saying this, right? Be strong.
Yeah.
Be courageous, Troy. And he's saying the same to you. Then he says, do not be afraid. And that word means dread. So again, you've got this whole battle going on, right? You got the walls of Jericho and whatever those walls are in your life, right? It's the fact that he walked out on you. It's the fact that the college denied it. It's the fact that the book you wrote is not hard copy or hardcover, right? Whatever it is, okay? It's happening, and then it's easy again for you to feel a sense of dread.
Yeah.
Right? What's going to happen next? What's going to take place next? So he says, don't be afraid. Don't dread, right? Because why? Because God's made promises. All of us are created intentionally to succeed. He's given us all gifts. He's given us all talents. He's given us, all those things. He can reconcile relationships. He can impact us financially. He can do all those kind of things in all of our lives. And so it's like, don't dread the future. Because again, that leads to what? Depression. Yeah. And depression leads to bad decisions, which leads to greater discouragement, which leads to depression, which leads to illness, which leads to stress and anxiety, and ultimately suicide. So this is serious, because it can lead us to a place we don't want to go. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, and I know this sounds like a sermon, but I need it. Right? And then he finally says, don't be discouraged.
Yeah.
Right. And again, what Mr. Logos said there is disheartened. Right. So why would God tell us tell them when they're about to have their greatest success not to be disheartened? I mean, isn't that kind of crazy? I mean, you would think he'd be, it'd be like, hey, don't get too prideful.
Yeah.
Don't become too arrogant.
Yeah.
Be careful. You're about to cross the Jordan River. But he doesn't. He's saying all these opposite things to get them ready for their greatest victory. And I think it's because sometimes we see victory. There's another story in the Old Testament about a great prophet has a great victory, and he thinks he's going to then experience a great transformation in the government. And instead, a queen named Jezebel wants to kill him.
Yeah.
And he gets depressed and discouraged, and he runs and he hides, right? So there's lots of these kind of stories right after a great victory or right before a great victory, because we have this expectation that everything's going to be straight up.
Yeah.
There's a battle, right? We all know you got to work hard. It's like gains. If you've ever worked out, right? You go to the gym, and early on, you can go from the 110 weakling to the 150, 160 pound muscled up guy. Then you hit a plateau.
Yeah.
Right. And you can just hear and say, don't become discouraged. Don't become disheartened. What I kind of wrote down as I was thinking about this is you're going to experience the unexpected. Yeah. So he tells them, don't be disheartened. Hang on to the promise and remain courageous. And I think that is a good word for all of us, because we live in a world that's not perfect. And we live in a world where you can go from discouragement to self-pity to victimhood, right? Because we all have a story to tell where we're the victim, because life is challenging. Yeah. But be strong, because God has made promises.
That's good.
And he ultimately does exactly what he says he's going to do. So I just want to say to all of us on this Sunday, to wrap up our time together and give away our prizes, is to be strong, be courageous, be very courageous. Or I could say it this way: keep hold of God's promises in your life that are multiple in the scripture. Make the mind strong, never dread, and expect the unexpected, because in the end, you will be victorious.